Yeah, it makes me think about how does an employer move from maybe just doing a one-off wellness program or initiative to truly operationalizing a wellness strategy?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things that we need to do is to stop looking at it as like a wellness strategy, but start to think of it as a business strategy because our biggest asset is human capital. And so this is really an investment into a business strategy.
Hi, and welcome to Captivating Health Insights. Today we are talking about the science of employee health and how physical and mental well-being can reduce claims and improve productivity. I'm super excited to introduce our guest, Dr. Claire Muselman. Welcome, Claire.
Thanks for having me, Madison. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here too. And for those of our listeners that are not familiar with you, can you share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I am a behavioral scientist at Drake University, where I am a professor. I teach undergrad, master's, and I run an executive education program. But my research is based heavily in the insurance space. After spending 20 plus years in the insurance and risk world, I decided to really dive into the behavioral science behind why people act the way that they do. So I started my career as a young, fresh out of college, decided to dive right into workers' compensation. But my friend's dad, my doubles partner in high school, her dad actually ran a law firm and had asked me if I would like to come be an intern there when I was trying to figure out my career path post-college, and it happened to be a workers' compensation defense firm. There was a wing in his firm that actually focused on injured workers, and it was where the first time I had ever really been exposed to meatpacking plants.
Okay.
And I will tell you, the records that would come from the meatpacking plants for us to look through had a very distinguishing odor. Things you don't forget in life. But then my career progressed, and I had the opportunity to end up working for a very large group of nurses and medical directors that focused on psychosocial issues of people. And so we would look at why do some people heal faster than others with the exact same injury, exact same diagnoses. You look at them from a medical stance, and you're like, okay, these people should have this outcome. And we would focus on what else exists. What's their work history? What's their home dynamic? What are their adverse childhood effects that might have impacted their recovery rate? And that got me really thinking into how we could fold this into the insurance industry. So I came back into the claims space and started to utilize this as a way of how do we utilize this by focusing on emotional intelligence from a claims standpoint. And now I look at it more from like a behavioral science standpoint of employee well-being, of looking at safety, and then also what do employers do for their employees? Because if we don't focus on this now, we are seeing such incredible things that are going on throughout just society as a whole, that these elements are only getting more important, not less.
Well, so interesting. So you actually started in the risk space, and then you got interested in employee behavior or just people behavior, and now you're taking what you learned there and you're kind of applying it back to the original study of risk, workers' comp, employee health.
Yeah. So my doctorate is in organizational development with an emphasis on organizational leadership. And my studies for that were focused on the generational differences of employee engagement. And so when we look at the different facets that exist within employee engagement, there's very different factors that impact people. And as right now we've got Gen Z in the workforce, and then we are having this upbringing of Generation Alpha. They want very different things to care about their work versus a traditionalist or a baby boomer that were much more on the transaction. Like you go and you work and you do your work and you leave, or you spend 4 years at a company, where the younger generations are like, so what's in it for me? What if I'm going to give you my time? What are you going to do for me? And
Right.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I'm super excited about this conversation because not only just because of your background and what you bring to the conversation, but I studied employee wellness and have been kind of in that space my whole career. And it's so interesting. I think a lot of the times it gets kind of labeled as a nice to have.
Yeah.
And you have kind of shown in the research that you've done, it's not a nice to have anymore. So can you help us understand more about why it's not just a nice to have anymore. It's
Absolutely.
a need to have.
So let's think about, if we look at the like what's called the life force pyramid. So these are the things that make up how you or I feel on an average basis. The big fundamental components, about like 85% of how you're feeling and how I'm feeling right now, are based upon how well we've been sleeping, how much movement our bodies have had, and how much what does our nutrition look like. And I'll be really honest, yesterday I had 2 bagels and a Kit Kat, so my nutrition's not super high today. Working
We've all
on
been
it.
there.
Baby steps, baby steps. But we look at that makes up 85% of how we're gonna show up today. And then the next 10% is all about your relationships. So if we look back at workplace dynamics, what do those relationships look like? And then the last like 5% is just, how do you relate to yourself? How self-aware are you? And we like to think that we are self-aware, but about single digits is probably where the US population is for self-awareness. So we have a lot that we could grow with on that. But if we look at, all right, so we know these fundamental dynamics, the biggest components are gonna be movement and sleep and nutrition. Okay, so when we look at an employee wellness program, if 85% of how our employees are showing up are based on movement, nutrition, and sleep, there's a huge correlation with making that a priority of making sure that our employees are taking care of themselves in the way that we can emphasize, but also lead by example. Because I think what we've seen with this nice to have, and I had actually had this conversation yesterday, when we look at a wellness program, for example, or somebody is offering, you get a gym membership. It's like, oh, that's like a really great perk. And it's like, it's a very smart strategic perk, because people that are gonna utilize that are gonna end up getting more movement in their body. They're gonna pay more attention to the nutrition that they're putting in their body. And you start to look at, well, how does that end up impacting your health insurance premiums? How does that impact their overall mental health? How does that impact productivity and overall engagement? And it's a win-win. So you pay an incentive like $50, $100 a month for your employee to have access to a gym, or you put an investment into your own gym within your corporation. And the residuals from that are amazing if you look at it from a return on investment standpoint. Plus, you're showcasing, if you're going to take out like the business side of the strategy, it is showcasing to your employees that you care about their wellness. Now, I have been taking advantage of ours. I really appreciate it. It's one of those things. And sometimes people will put in, you have to go X number of times to the gym to make sure that you can have the reciprocity.
Right. There's some like accountability there.
Yeah. But it's showing like, where do you place value? Or like when we see a couple times a year, like I've seen organizations do like community walks, or how many steps can you get in a month, and you put on a team so you get the community build that we're looking for from a socialization standpoint, but you're also coupling it with trying to get people to move more, get outside, do something. There's just different types of incentive when we look at this as, why does it end up boosting morale? It improves your brain function, it improves your just how you feel on a regular basis, and then it produces a snowball effect from your neurotransmitters when you're starting to do this from the beginning of starting to build a habit. And if you can get that accountability by using other people that are in your workplace to be able to do this, it holds that accountability to something beyond yourself, and you're looking that you belong to something greater than yourself. And so you're more likely to stick with it than if you were just going to try and start something on your own. So when we look at it as a nice to have versus almost a necessity, it's really those core foundational principles of looking at, how do we do what we can with what we have to focus on helping our employees pay attention to their sleep, their nutrition, and their movement. And I'm not saying go work out at CrossFit every day, but movement, meaning like, have you gotten up and moved around and like physically moved your body? We're supposed to move like 8,000 to 10,000 steps a day. COVID changed a lot of that for people when we started working at home or working remotely. People just weren't getting enough movement. So if you start to kill the movement, it's a lot harder to sleep if your body is not exhausted, and then nutrition kind of falls to the wayside if those two patterns aren't in alignment.
Yeah, just from a practical standpoint, I mean, you mentioned the gym memberships. I've even seen some employers giving like a health fund to say like, you can spend this on whatever, whether it's gym memberships, whether it's literally like dinner with your husband because you don't have a baby. It's just like, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it is, no questions asked. And that's great for some organizations, and others, they want the accountability. They need that accountability piece. So it just depends on your population that you're working with.
Absolutely, but I think that you are bringing up a really good point. You've got to know your population, that you've got to know your employees, and that's one of those things, like even just no matter what it is in leadership and wellness, like how well do you know your employees beyond the work? So a lot of times employees don't hear from their direct supervisor or their direct leader of any capacity unless something's wrong, which creates a whole dynamic within that, or they don't hear that they've been doing good work, and the absence of negative feedback is not positive. Gallup's done a lot of research on this as well, and one of the studies that I was shocked by was in 2019, so pre-COVID, like 87% of the US workforce was reporting that they had not had a good job from their direct leader in over a year.
Wow.
Because we do make this misconception that the absence of negative feedback means that you're doing great.
Right.
You still need that validation. Like we as humans need to hear, this is done well. You asked this great. This presentation was fantastic. Really love the way you put that extra effort in. Like those little tiny moments end up giving us little neurotransmitter releases and give us some little brain boosts in our chemistry. And that ends up helping us really steamroll into what's coming next for, all right, I want to try harder. I want to do more. I want to do better, because it's helping us, again, if you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, trying to climb that hierarchy, but you've got to have that human validation along the way, because self-accountability only gets you so far in those situations.
You mentioned neurotransmitters. So if we kind of tap into your safety side from a neurobiological standpoint, what's the risk of employers not focusing in on, you even say like from a dehydration standpoint or fatigue, like what's the risk that can happen with employees when that's at play?
So a few things on this. So hydration, most of us are walking around dehydrated. Another huge percentage population, over 2/3 of us are walking around dehydrated. All right, so a couple things on this. Our decision-making capacity can only function as quickly as how much sleep did you get the night before, how much nutrition, like what's your nutrition look like? And I would relate hydration into the nutrition component.
Okay.
And then your movement. So if we focus on those elements from a decision-making capacity, each day you wake up with like what I would call an energy bank, or it's your cognitive load for the day. And we talk about this a couple of ways where you've heard the term, if you have two big frogs, like eat the biggest one first, or eat the biggest frog throughout the day, or whatever. Do the hard thing first. Yeah. And we do that because you've got the most brain capacity to function at your highest ability in that morning. And throughout the day, it dwindles. So where do you want to spend your energy? And this is where there's so much that goes into this. But basically, we're looking at where are you going to put your energy and effort towards? So by the end of the day, what does that look like compared to the beginning of the day? And so a lot of this from a hydration standpoint is how quickly can it get done? When you're dehydrated, your brain isn't going to fire as quickly. And so then we see like people have like what I call glitches. If I think of like the movie Wreck-It Ralph, where the girl's like glitching, but it's really, that's what's happening in your brain, because you don't have the hydration components to get those neurotransmitters to fire quickly in order for you to be able to render a decision. So think of, all right, if you touched your hand on a stove, how quickly would you respond? Now, a lot of this goes into fight, flight, freeze mode, but that's also controlled in the brain by your amygdala. And that's where we've got to really think about, okay, so how much emphasis do we put on this if we can understand it from a bigger construct of safety? Not only that, when we start to look at tissue breakdown and tissue repair, we think about it from the construct of, all right, hydrated bodies can recover quicker. And when we think about like, all right, if you have a tendon issue or, you throw out your shoulder or whatnot, I mean, I would love to see research that is done on well-hydrated injuries versus non, because you've got more ability to tear when you don't have like that lubricant within your own body. And our bodies are made up of what, like 80 or 90% water. Like this is a big thing for us to be focusing on. So there's a lot that comes into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating to me, because I've worked with employers in the past and we've done hydration challenges, and you kind of almost like can downplay it. Like it's such a silly thing. It's just a hydration challenge. We're going to get these water bottles. But it's actually really important. You're saying like cognitive reaction abilities and healing from injuries. It's a lot more important than people think, kind of connecting those dots, even with something like hydration.
Absolutely. So I can tell you personally, I can feel a difference, like from a cognitive standpoint, on how quickly I can articulate something, or if I have to pause, or if there's any type of what I would call like a glitch, if we misspeak. And so sometimes when I hear people doing that, I'm like, oh, you want to take a break and grab some water, or like, and you just try to encourage people, but we've got to be paying attention to the fact that these things happen, and it's not just somebody's personality or the way that they do this, but it could actually be a body mechanics issue. The other is I tore out my hip during a work injury while I was in an office, and literally the physician and I had a conversation where he's like, I wonder if you focused on your hydration more, if it would have torn in this capacity. And I'm like, really, all from just hydration? And he's like, yes. So
That is crazy.
interesting when we start to think about, and there's been like, I think there's studies on like if Red Bull depletes bone density and stuff like that, but it's really about those dehydrating factors that go into how our body is actually functioning. And again, it's going to look different for different people. Some people are going to be better at their load of water first thing in the morning, which I know can be really helpful because we wake up chronically dehydrated. So how quickly can you do that? But also it's not just water, like how much of the electrolyte balance did you lose? And so then you've got to figure out what is your own balance, and there's all this fun science that goes into it.
So let's get really practical for a second. I'm thinking about the HR person that's listening and saying, I get it, Dr. Claire and Maddison, my employees need to be hydrated and well-nourished. How, as an employer, have you seen like what that actually looks like? Obviously it depends on the population, but just some examples of how do you actually enable that and encourage that in a workplace?
Sure. So I think that we have some common pitfalls that a lot of people fall into, where we want to tell people the what we want from them. We want you to eat better. We want you to move more. We want you to sleep better. Congratulations. Awesome. That's not the way the brain is going to receive the information. People don't care. That's
Right.
great. But that's not how you're going to actually get change management. We have to actually see it in a couple of constructs. One, the way that we articulate messaging around this has to be tied into something that's going to be purposeful, meaningful, and get some teeth. So having stories behind this stuff can be really powerful. You know, like Claire, I can give you one, so I'll give you a fun one. So I quit drinking alcohol. I lost 85 pounds. Like that's a big
Wow.
one. All right. And so then what else happens as a result of that? Well, I move more. I eat better. Like there's a lot of things that come from that. So if you've got people in your company that have actually had experiences about any of the health initiatives that you're going to be implementing, or even if it's family members, having a real life story helps illustrate this for someone else so that they can see it. The other thing that we've got to think about is the brain does better when it is understanding things from a feeling capacity. So if we start with, why does this matter? What is the purpose behind this? What's in it for me? And we start with the why, and then we move into the how we're going to get there, and then we get into the what you actually want to get out of this. Our brains do a better job of buying in because we talk about things more from like a feeling aspect, and that is the part of the brain, the limbic brain, that drives human behavior. We like to go to people with facts and figures and give them all this data. That's not going to help somebody make a decision to actually change their behavior. It can help amplify whatever we're talking about, but we tend to talk about, we're going to do this new health initiative. Here's what it is, how we're going to do it. And then the why ends up like falling off to the wayside, and people aren't paying attention enough at that point. We've got to flip the dynamic to get people to understand how we communicate. And then the most important part is seeing people doing it. So a lot of times we don't get full buy-in from leadership, or you're not getting full buy-in from the people that have influence. So not necessarily just a positional power, but who within your organization do you know that can help encourage people along the way? And this is where we look at it more from like a social bias where, they're doing it, I should probably do it too. And then you can build community through that. But a lot of these initiatives, like I'll give one that kind of is stigmatized, EAP benefits. All right, well, most people don't even understand that there's legal benefits that come from that or financial, but if we don't talk about it and actually put it on the table and then showcase that some of these benefits are being used. I love EAP benefits. I think they're wonderful. I think everyone should use their 3 therapy visits every year, or whatever programs are offered. But you've got to be willing as leaders to show up in that capacity and be just enough vulnerable to make your teams understand that you are a person. We're all imperfect, but we've held leadership in a stance that kind of depersonalizes this. And if they're going to be benefits that are offered by a company, it needs to be more than just, well, HR walked us through this at open enrollment, or during my onboarding, I learned it in this capacity. Okay, how are your leaders utilizing this on a regular basis? During team meetings, are we calling it out and saying, hey, we've got this initiative, or this is how I've seen X number of people do it. And this isn't looking at trying to get into people's personal health information.
So in terms of metrics, what metrics do you recommend employers look at to truly connect the well-being to claims and productivity?
Yeah, so I think first is, okay, so we talk about employee engagement scores quite a bit. Tons of tools. I'm a big fan of the Gallup Q12. It's technically 13 questions, but they start with question 0 and it goes 0 to 12. This gives, anyone can use this at any point to determine what's my team feeling in this moment. That's a good proof point for people that are younger in leadership, or maybe they're supervisors versus managers or directors or VPs. Easy proof point, easy check-in with like, how is my team feeling? Like one of those big questions is, do I have a best friend at work? Looking at where somebody falls on a continuum of that. Okay, do we need to be reaching out? Like there's a lot that you can get from that data from an individual contributor standpoint, and it's cost effective. Again, you can go pull these questions and just have your leaders be surveying their people every so often, or throw it into a Qualtrics or a SurveyMonkey or something, and just have that done. It's very accessible and it's very cost effective. Now, big ones. Absenteeism, turnover. If you're getting a lot of turnover, are you actually getting exit surveys done to figure out like, where is the disconnect? Is it work? Is it feelings? Is it what's going on? What's happening here? We hear a lot of times people are leaving because they don't like their leaders. Is that still true? I don't know. There's a lot of differentiating factors. We're seeing a lot of like that work flexibility is huge right now. So things to think about. I think I would look at that. I also think you've got to benchmark. Where are you at right now from an overall wellness standpoint? What data is available to you? When's the last time you've asked for data? And what's available for you to be able to reference? And then you prioritize it. All right, where are your biggest spends coming from a personal health standpoint? How much utilization are you getting on preventative health? Here's a really good one that I had when I was actually on the insurance side. This organization went ahead and we looked at, they were having a lot of foreign matter to the eye workers' compensation claims. So we went and took a look at their benefits and what was going on, and they were only getting about 2% utilization of their vision insurance. So when we had talked to the employees and we're like, hey, what's going on? Why do we keep having this? Like, help us understand from a safety perspective, why are you not wearing the appropriate eyewear? Well, a lot of the employees reported that they either would have to wear they were wearing their glasses on top of the goggles instead of just getting goggles that would be prescription grade for them. And so here's a really easy blend of how we take wellness benefits and help mitigate an issue where the vision insurance would cover that. They would be able to cover prescription eyewear for this specific job. So the employees or the employer went ahead and did a marketing campaign about, hey, we care about you. It went in every paycheck. It was in newsletters. They did this big thing. Like, we want to make sure that your eyes are protected. Did you know that we pay for your vision insurance? And here is what you qualify for as our employee. So go get your eyes checked. Go get your eyewear you can utilize here that is going to be specific for you. And then they gave people the time to go do that. And guess what? Claims dropped and they got better utilization of a benefit that they were already paying for. So this is where we can look at what data exists and what narrative can you try and go, and then just go ask. Go ask your employees, like, what are you using? What are you not? What are we worried about? Employee surveys, like a lot of times if you give people an anonymous survey, they will give you good feedback. They want to know the why. Why do you care about this? And then you kind of walk through it in that element. So then also we want to look for what can you quantify, because any initiative, we want to be able to measure it. So what data is available again? What are our spends? And I would look at health benefits of what we're doing from a wellness standpoint. I would also look at your comp benefits, because guess what? Both are going to be covered under the same umbrella that you're paying out in some capacity. Also, what other benefits do your employees need that we might not be considering? And so that's where one of those employee surveys could be helpful, where we don't know what we don't know. And especially as we've got so many different generations now. You've got traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen X, millennial, Gen Z, and Generation Alpha coming in now. That's a lot of different types of people to come together and have different stages of their life for what they need to be thinking about from a healthcare standpoint. So then we survey, all right, what's important to you? What can we provide? And how do we do this from an effective standpoint?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I think a lot of times we bucket things like benefits and workers' comp and wellness, and there's so much overlap. And it's really about connecting those dots because when you improve a benefit, you're improving their well-being. You can be potentially improving their safety when they're all kind of interconnected, and it really should be an overall like business strategy, like you said
really
before.
Should be.
And not just kind of siloing everything because there's so much connection across these lanes that we've created.
Yeah, and when we start to look at like taking care of our employees, a lot of times people get fearful when you hear FMLA, or we get fearful if it's a disability benefit. These are our people, and it is our obligation and responsibility to do our best for our people. That is the role that we sign into when we're going to be leaders of organizations. I have yet to see somebody get sued by caring about their employee and checking in and just saying, hey, I'm just checking in on you. Novel concepts, but they're little elements that people tend to get skittish around, where we've got to break those rules, break those barriers around that. I'm not asking you to send me your medical information over a text message. I'm literally just checking in and saying, how are you? Yep. But that needs to be an organizational culture thing where we do just check in on people because it's the right thing to do. There was another I think I saw this on the Huberman podcast, actually, where he was interviewing another data scientist about how even just the sheer mentality of texting someone in the morning and saying good morning can actually help build that tribal mentality that we all need. So when I told you about, we've got the life force pyramid and we're focusing on our sleep, nutrition, and movement. And that next part is the relationships. So how do we remember that we belong to something bigger than ourselves? We need that tribal mentality. We need other people. It's also in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's that love and belonging piece, the sheer art of just reaching out to someone and offering them a good morning. So we have a ridiculous amount of tools in our workforce right now, from Slack to Teams to Zoom, whatever. Like having that be part of your culture where your leaders reach out to people to just not need anything, but just say, good morning, hey, how's your day? Something so simple can start the process of this in such an easy, very inexpensive, not time-consuming way. And if we forget about this stuff, go ahead and set yourself a calendar reminder, like an Outlook that says, all right, on Tuesdays at 4, I'm going to check in and see how Madison's doing today. Like work smarter, not harder. There's a lot of tools out there, and that human element is the most important one when we're starting to look at how do we really do a wellness overhaul for an organization.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, what I'm taking is it's really about knowing your people and what they need. I mean, you gave the example with the vision insurance. I heard an example recently of a law firm, primarily kind of female driven, and they started offering better mental health benefits and PTO to take time to get therapy if you're looking for that, and also fertility benefits because these are kind of career-driven women, they're older, and so that was huge for them in retaining talent and improving employee satisfaction. So it's really a lot of it's just knowing your people and kind of there's, like you said, surveys, talking to people. There's different ways to get there. That's also knowing your population.
Yeah.
Can you do a survey? Do you have a trusting environment where people are going to be honest? I would say the biggest thing I see with surveys is not following up.
Yes.
If you do a survey and you ask for their opinion and people give it to you and you do nothing, you actually are worse than when you started.
Yes.
Because now, why did I do that survey? I never heard what happened with that. You actually decreased trust when you had an opportunity to say, we heard you, and this is what we can do, and this is what we can't do. Yeah. And this is why. You don't have to do everything that they ask for. You can't possibly do that. But you can at least say, we heard you, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, you can acknowledge that so people feel seen that we did go through this. And guess what? Out of this, we can take these top 3 priorities, and then here's what we're going to do with them. And then you communicate how to do it. Like this. So I love that they're offering like this female law firm or predominantly female law firm is going to offer these fertility benefits. Super great that they're going to do that. It's also then making sure your employees can use them. So if we're going to offer like EAP benefits and say, hey, you know what, if you need to have like the financial counseling or you have a legal issue or whatnot, you can still take that time. So that to that PTO aspect, it's great to offer them, but there's a different element of buy-in that goes in when you can put your money where your mouth is and be like, no, and you can have the time to do it. Like that was, I think, one of the bigger pillars of success for the vision insurance example is that employer gave people the time to go get their eyesight checked so that they could then go pick up their new eyewear and then utilize it. And I mean, it's one of the best like success stories I've seen of bringing holistic wellness together from it not just being the siloed components, but it actually benefited the entire organization in a way that also got to remind people, hey, we genuinely care about you. We want to make sure that you're going to be great when you walk out of here, right? We want you to have your eyesight. Like that's a big part of things. So here's what we're going to do to invest in you back. We offer these benefits and we're going to give you the time to be able to go do that. And then again, you just work with your people. Like, all right, you and I obviously aren't going to go at the same time. You go on a Tuesday, I'll go next week, and you make it work for your people with their scheduling so that they can actually take advantage of these benefits because, hello, we spend a lot of money on them.
So much money. Yeah.
So much money. We need to be utilizing them. So how do we start to do that? And visual communication is really helpful with that storytelling and then that consistency in messaging so that it's not just being heard by here's HR with a new initiative, but it's a buy-in that's being talked about and you're doing it in multiple mediums from a visual construct, an auditory construct of having it talked about at meetings, maybe utilizing examples and stories, and then having that written area for you, as well as a repository if people might be shy in a meeting and don't want to ask questions, where can they go access it afterwards? You've got to have those three pillars there.
So as we're closing and wrapping up, if there's an employer listening that's like, okay, I'm bought in, I want to incorporate well-being and safety as a business strategy.
Yeah.
What's the first step that they should take?
I would take an analysis of where are you, take a snapshot right now. Because if we're going to put this into an organizational objective and we're going to start to say, all right, we're going to make progress on this being starting now or in next quarter, you have to have a benchmark. And a lot of times with these, people are like, all right, we're going to start this new initiative and they forget to take a snapshot of where they're at.
They don't measure it.
They don't measure it. Yeah. So start by getting a good baseline and then figure out what your low-hanging fruit can be to start an initiative of no more than 3. Pick 3 areas that you want to focus on and find those ones that can have quick wins that you can easily validate your employees in. What are some easy ways that we can validate, like, hey, I saw you doing this, great job. Or we can start to measure some of these easier elements so then we can start getting into the stuff that might be a little bit more scary for people, like what preventative measures can we deal with from a cancer standpoint. That's going to be a little bit harder to get the buy-in because we've got to motivate people from a different way than just, here's a water bottle, let's drink some more water together. There's just different ways of doing this. So I would take a snapshot and I would go after some low-hanging fruit because this is going to steamroll a snowball effect and this helps release a lot of neurotransmitters for us to be able to build habits along the way.
No, I think that's perfect. And what would you say, like, in terms of benchmarking, what are some of the common ones that you see? I know it depends on the population, but are typically those lower hanging fruit items so that you can get quicker wins?
So I would look at your claim spend. And I would look at your claim spend not only on the health and wellness side, but I would also go look at your work comp spend because I think they go hand in hand as much as we want to say they're different. Not really. As an employer, it's our job to take care of our employees, whether they're injured at work or whether they're injured at home. Figure out what that spend is. I would also look at pharmacy spend. I think that one is really telling, especially if we're going to start trying to educate people on mental health and why this is so important and our nutrition and our sleep and our movement and starting to focus on those elements. When you start to combine that, I would want to know what my spend looks like right now and then figuring out what is it being spent on. I don't know how granular most employers can get on this, but it's telling you a story through your people. And then you can figure out what benefits do we need to add or release and also that utilization. What's your utilization rate? That's a huge one. Okay, if we're getting 2% on vision and how much are we spending in that? Oh, the other one, dental is a really big indicator of how people are feeling about their mental health.
Dental?
Dental is a huge,
Help me understand
research
that.
on this. So people think about some of the first habits that go to the wayside. If you're too tired at night, do you still go brush your teeth? And you start to look at this. Some of the habits that when people's mental health starts to deteriorate, teeth end up being, oral hygiene ends up being one of the first to go out the door. So pay attention to that. Are you actually getting some usage out of your dental benefits? And I would look at the dental and the mental health component because sometimes they go hand in hand.
That's crazy. It's crazy. I know in COVID, like dental health went down because people weren't like getting out the door and brushing their teeth as much. So it's all interconnected. It's so fascinating.
It is, and how it impacts your whole cardiovascular system. There's a lot that goes into that. So I would look very easy, super easy wins. Look at your current spend. Look at it from a health and wellness and a work comp standpoint, and then look at your utilization hit rate. What are we looking at from our preventative health that we're paying for right now? And where are our gaps? That one's going to be, a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. So re-educating your workforce to understand, hey, here's what you qualify for. Please don't use the word entitled. People get rubbed the wrong way with that. But as an employee of our organization, you qualify for this. And here's how we're going to help you use it. And then having it done from a visual and auditory and a consistency in written messaging so that it's not just a one-time, once and done, I heard this, but it is being lived and through your organization and through the people, because the people are going to be the best word of mouth to make sure that this stuff actually takes some teeth and moves forward.
I love that point that it has to be marketed well, because think about kind of any initiative. If the marketing is thoughtful and on point and intentional, you're just going to be bought into it more easily. I mean, it's just basic marketing.
Yeah.
When I was doing wellness programs long ago, I didn't know how to like write emails. Like they would all have all these texts, and it was like I had a marketing problem. People would tell me like, I don't read your emails; they're way too long.
Sure.
And just even thinking about that, like if this is an organizational initiative and it's a priority, then it needs to look like it.
Yeah.
You know, it can't just be a messy flyer.
Yeah.
Like think about it like from a a marketing standpoint. So I think that's a great point.
And I think when we look at it, when we start to look at it from a cost standpoint, okay, so we're going to benchmark this, but also this is going to take people's energy and resources and budgets to be able to do this. If you can get somebody to get a preventative cancer screening, maybe it's just one employee, and they catch something that is going to be life-changing, than having to, look at it, one, watch that person and the organizational ripple that will have in addition to the cost of what that's going to do. But this is where it ends up being more systemic. And so when we look at how we're going to place our time, talent, resources, our energy, our money, where we're going to do our budgets, you've got to really look at it from that you are making an investment on the front end to help course correct what could be coming in the future.
Yep. Okay, anything you want to leave our listeners with? Anything that we didn't touch on, or just kind of wrapping up that you want to share?
I think everyone needs to go get some water. Go get yourself hydrated. If you're not feeling awesome today, whenever you're not feeling great, do a simple check. How well did I sleep last night? How's my nutrition? Maybe I should change it. Maybe I should just make a little adjustment and get up and move. Just get up and move your body. You will feel so much better in the process. And it starts with us. If we do this, other people will join in, or getting a coworker to go with you. I'm going to go grab a water. You want to come with? I'm going to go for a walk. Do you want to come with? Bring people with you. Building that community, and that's your next level of that life force pyramid.
I love that, because it does start with us. And if we're not doing it, like how can we expect anyone else to do it?
And I'm a big believer that I love me problems because I can fix me problems. So when it does start with us, sure, I'll take it. Self-awareness.
Well, thank you so much for all the insights that you shared today, Dr. Claire. This has been a treasure trove of knowledge, so thank you.
Thank you.